Welcome to Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth, the podcast where we explore the beautiful, messy and transformative magic that happens when we dare to go within. I'm your host, Robin Harris, and in each episode we'll dive into real, honest stories from people who've faced their fears, embraced their vulnerabilities and discovered unexpected growth in their personal lives, careers, or businesses. This is a space for deep listening, open hearts, and soul-nourishing conversations. Because when we meet ourselves in our rawest moments, that's often where our greatest wisdom starts. Let's begin.
Hello and welcome back to another episode, and today I'm very excited because I've got my friend Nigel here with me, and if you've been following me for a while you'll know that Nigel and I used to run a podcast together called the Positive Progress Podcast. Yeah. I could always trip over that one, too many P's, too much alliteration in that. So it's wonderful to have you as my guest on this podcast, Nigel.
Thank you for having me on.
And as you know, if you've been following any of these podcasts, I always start with an introduction. So just to say that Nigel is a former police officer who brings a wealth of real-world experience and grounded insight to his work. After experiencing the impact of deep, yet largely subconscious, stress in his own life, he became passionate about supporting others to create meaningful, lasting change. Through practical human interaction and honest communication, Nigel helps people move forward with clarity, confidence, and real progress. His approach centers on real-life well-being through partnership, walking alongside people rather than telling them what to do. Nigel is also an advocate of the powerful message, "It's okay to say," encouraging open conversations when things aren't okay, and helping to break down stigma around stress and well-being. Alongside this meaningful work, Nigel also is the co-creator of the fun and fabulous Taffman and the Grand Leek video series, bringing a playful Welsh perspective on life, laughter, and human connection. So it's great, as I was saying, to have you here, Nigel. And I'm going to start, I always ask my guests 3 questions just to help us all tune in. And the first of those is, what makes your story relatable for others?
What makes my story relatable? I think the core of everything that I say and do is exactly as you just did in the intro, right? And you just said about, I tried to have that sort of human interaction, that human connection, right? Because there is no the one way in my world of doing things. And we've had this conversation when we were doing the podcast previously about Robin's way is slightly different than Nigel's way, is slightly different to Bob or Alice's way or whatever. So what makes me relatable is the fact that I talk about my own life. And I did a presentation the other day for a group of first responders on behalf of a training company. And the very first thing that I say is I'm going to talk about me. But then I always turn around and say, when I say it like that, there's somebody in the room who's going to turn around and say, who is this fella? Why is he talking about himself? Is he something special? Is he something different? And the point that I'm making is the fact I'm none of those things. I'm not special. I'm not different. I'm very, very ordinary. And I always concentrate on things that I know, things that I've felt, things that I've actually experienced myself. Because not only is that where the strength is in relation to people thinking I have some sort of value to offer, but it's also because of the fact that that's the easiest thing for me, because I'm not talking about what could be some sort of abstract idea. I'm not talking about something which could be a theory. Now, don't get me wrong, I got nothing wrong with research or academia and stuff like that, but that's not my bag. That's not where I'm sitting, sort of thing. So if you're saying about relatable, I think it's the fact that I concentrate on things that I have first-hand knowledge of for those 2 reasons. First of all, that's my strongest area. And secondly, because of the fact I think in many respects it's the most effective.
Yeah. And we relate to stories, don't we? So if you're telling
Yeah,
your story, it's bound to be relatable. And
yeah.
who do you feel will gain the most from listening to this conversation?
That's an interesting question because um, in the best possible way, I don't know. And in some ways, I don't want to know. The reason being is because I don't aim at an audience. I'm not restrictive in relation to the people that I decide that I want to talk to or the people who are likely to listen to what I've got to say. Uh, the reason I don't have that target audience is because I think that you don't know who's likely when you say something, right? You, me, or anybody else, not as experts, not as people who know about these things, but just as people, you don't know who's actually going to grab that thing. You don't know whose day is going to be affected in a positive way because of something that Robin or Nigel said. So, in one respect, I really quite deliberately steer away from having a audience because there could be somebody who I could dismiss. I could say, oh, well, that's not really the people I'm looking to talk to. And that could be the person, or they could be the people who get the most from it. So that's not by way of not answering your question. That's by way of just saying that we shouldn't be restricted. We shouldn't exclude people. And then, like, it's an open tent, if you like. Everybody can come in if they want to.
And what do you hope those people will take away?
Ideally, I would hope that they would understand and enact my main messages, which is it's okay to say, which is all about the fact that in my own personal experience, when I went through my crash and burn, I had a choice, and the choice was to either keep it to myself or to give it out to the world. And the reason I say that is because of the fact I didn't want this to happen. This is a very unpleasant thing to happen to anybody. It's worrying, it's concerning, it's this feeling of disconnection, this feeling of an abnormality for a period of time. But I chose, if you like, to use that experience because I can't undo it. You can never undo anything in life, right? You can't make anything unhappen. It's a ridiculous idea that you can turn back time and you can actually change things. You can learn from those things because they have happened and they are going, they're part of your makeup. They're part of the way that you move forward with your life. And the choices were either I could ignore it, which was never going to be a reasonable choice for me because it was something so substantial. I thought I've got to do something with this. You can accept it, but not choose not to use it. Or you can choose to do what I chose to do, which was to accept it and say, I can't change it. If I can use it, or let's see if I can use it for the benefit of other people. And that's why I try to make it as relatable and realistic as possible.
And you just mentioned there that crash and burn that you
Yeah.
experienced. And you've talked before about how you felt it came out of the blue. Maybe not in hindsight, but at the time it felt like it just blindsided you.
Yeah.
But also, you recognize that it had been building for quite some time prior to that. So, can you tell us what that journey was like for you when it sort of manifested? It appeared apparently out of the blue at the time, and what you have then, with hindsight and through your journey, learnt about the hidden impact of stress in everyday life.
I said earlier on about the fact that I'm an ordinary person. I'm not special. I'm not super duper in any way. But my background is slightly different to normally people, or no, sort of normally people, normal people, in as much as I was a police officer for 30 years with the South Wales Police. So it's fair to say that I've seen and heard things and seen sort of had my fair share of blood, guts, and gore and all that sort of thing. And some of the distressing things, as well as the good things, as well as the positive things that you get to do as a police officer. And I was of the opinion when I joined in late 1979, right at the end of 1979. I was of the opinion, which was what I was told, which is suck it up, son. It's all part of the job. You know, it's all it comes with the territory. Don't be a sissy. Don't do this. Don't do that. Right? That disappeared or has disappeared to a certain extent over the years. But the job still has the same levels of stress and sort of unpleasant things that you have to say, do, smell, see, feel, etc., etc. And I was sort of I had 24 years servicing, funny enough, and I'd just been given my ideal job, more or less, to finish my career in an office job. And I had to go back to some practical policing for a reason to cover some shortages. Uh, and I went into the custody office as the custody officer. And the custody office, if you've never been in a custody office, it stinks. It's horrible. It's loud. It's aggressive. It's just like a horrible, horrible place to be. I hated it. I really did. And it was the only place as a police officer I really, really hated working. I went in on the one night, had a particularly torrid night, um, went home, went to bed, woke up, and I was getting ready to go to bed. Oh, sorry, getting ready to go back to work the next night. And I absolutely collapsed. I mean, literally physically and mentally collapsed. And I was on the floor and I was shouting and I was swearing and I was really, really scared. I thought I was dying, basically. And I'd had a huge panic attack and I just basically become unfunctional for that period of time. Um, and long story short, I then go and see a very good doctor who's now retired, who gave me a lot of time and a lot of help. And he explained to me, he said, you don't need to have a specific stressful event in your life, even though as a police officer you could do, for this to actually happen. And I was really intrigued. And he said it's like what they call the layering effect. And the layering effect is the fact that you get all these little levels of tiny, tiny, thin little levels that weigh almost nothing. But if you put them together, it's literally like the straw that breaks the camel's back, right? And eventually you will put a something on there. And it might be a quite inconsequential thing as far as you're concerned. And that will be the one thing that collapses that roof. And I had sat there in the middle of all this debris in my mind in this room which had collapsed. And I didn't understand. But as soon as I'd spoken to that doctor, and this is the power of it's okay to say, this explanation, this idea of sharing what your thoughts are, what's in your mind, it became very clear. Now, it didn't help my immediate situation because I was still in that sort of circumstance. But it was the beginning of some sort of clarity in relation to why this had happened to me. And it had been all those little things over the years, which I won't go into the details of now because there's no need to. But things that I'd seen, things that I'd heard over many years, which I'd taken on board because it was the way, you're a police officer, son, man up and all that sort of thing. And I'd eventually given in. But I don't say that in a negative way because now I look back at it with hindsight and giving in was the best thing I could do because it's like a pressure cooker. And a pressure cooker, to all intents and purposes, will keep building up pressure, 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 pressure. And it's designed so the top doesn't come off. But why is there that little valve? That little valve is there to make sure there's not too much pressure. And that's what had happened to me. And that's basically the story in a nutshell. That's the story of what happened to me at that particular time.
And now your work centers on real life well-being.
Yeah.
Through partnership and using that practical human interaction like you've just described with the doctor who was able to explain things to you. And although it didn't change anything in that moment, it maybe gave you that little bit of insight that allows over time for things to change and shift and transform. So what does your real life well-being through partnership, what does it look like in real life terms? And why is that so important for you?
There's two aspects to it, really. The first one is in relation to doing stuff like this and talking to other people. And interestingly enough, I wrote down before we started, I consider myself to be an unintentional disruptor. I know. What I mean by that is the fact that it's not my intention to disrupt. You get certain people, right? And they get on my nerves, to be honest, who will say, oh, I'm a disruptor. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to change everything. And I'm going to make sure that the status quo is smashed to pieces. Well, hang on. Whoa, 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 whoa. Half the time, the status quo has been a long time in the making. right? And it's a status quo for a reason. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But the reason I say I'm an intentional disruptor is because of the fact that it happens to be what I do. I don't, oh, excuse me. I know when you're doing a podcast, turn your phone off. I know. Sorry, my apologies. So I'm an unintentional disruptor because of the fact that what I do tends to be that way. I don't accept there's the way of doing things, as I was said in the very beginning. And the way that I do it is literally by having personal interaction. Now, I appreciate this is to a certain extent is personal interaction, but it's not me sitting with you as we have done together before and discussing our thoughts and ideas. But this is like a good way of getting the message out there. So I work with trainers and I supply what I call learning live role play services, right? Because the vast majority of people, if I said to you, right, Robin, now, this conversation we had before, I want you to be Mrs. Jones and your cat is stuck up a tree, right? And you're really distressed and you're going to go away and you're going to come into the room. Everybody's going to think, oh, poor old Mrs. Jones, cat stuck up a tree and all that sort of thing, right? It ain't going to work because the vast majority of people don't function that way. And I've got that show off gene, darling. Da, 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 da. And my two loves in life, and this ideally puts those two things together, is that performance thing, is the acting thing, which is, something that's been in the background always since I was quite young, and the education thing. So if I can use the physical interaction with people to assist them to understand something, and get them to discuss, not necessarily Nigel saying this is the way it should be, but saying, what do you think? How do you think that that fits in with your thoughts? And start that discussion. Then you're one big leap down the road. It's only a tiny, tiny step, but you're a big leap down the road. Because this is a cliche I actually do like, which is every giant journey starts with the smallest of steps. And I don't do cliches, as you know, but that's one I actually do believe in very, very strongly. So I actually work with trainers doing that. I was working with someone the other day and we had 3 really good days and we had excellent feedback from the what would you call them, students, I suppose, really, because it's different, because it actually frees them up to actually just do their job. So if you were in one of these sessions, you were there representing what you do with your stuff, right? With the wild stuff, right? And then we wanted to do something in relation to that. I'm not asking you to be anything other than Robin. I'm just asking you to come in and do what you do. And it seems to free people up an awful lot. So that's the one thing. And the other thing, I know I mentioned it already, but I'll go back to it again because it's so hugely important. It's just this idea of being able to open up, getting past the stigma, getting past the idea that people are going to laugh at you, getting past the idea that people are going to ridicule you because you are in some way you're weak, you're inefficient or ineffective in some way. We all have weaknesses. I've never met a human being, apart from if they were a liar or a fool, who believes that they're perfect in every way. We all have weaknesses. There is nothing wrong whatsoever in acknowledging those weaknesses as long as we don't just say, there you go. You use those things to say, how can I make things better? Or something else I will always stand by, how can I make things as best as they can be in my own special circumstances?
I think it's also great I'm not great at this, but you, another person, is. Let's collaborate. Let's put
Yeah.
my strengths with your strengths, and I will learn from you. And hopefully, my weaknesses will be better. I'll improve on them. I'll learn, and I'll grow, and I'll develop.
Can I give you a quick thing going back to the police analogy? The job I was talking about was the community safety manager for the Vale of Glamorgan in South Wales, right? And this was doing stuff with other organisations. And I'd always been sort of vaguely aware of the fact we work with the council, we work with charities, we work with businesses, we work with right? But I'd never actually been involved in it. And literally going back to what you just said, being absolutely true, is there were things I used to chair 2 groups myself. And I realized that there was somebody around that table that could do something in 3 minutes would take me 3 hours. And I realized there was somebody who could do something in 3 hours that could take me 3 days, and vice versa. And I love that. I absolutely love that. This is true collaboration. This is proper collaboration, not just words. When you can actually utilize the knowledge and the skills of each other in a positive way, that you can actually get things done as efficiently as possible. I.e., I'm not slogging away for hours when I don't need to, and vice versa. Someone can phone me, pick up the phone, and I go, I can do that for you, yeah. It's not a problem. I know a man. And that's real collaboration. That's real progress.
I love doing that. I love various different kinds of collaboration just like this, or lots of other things that I've been involved with, and just getting those opportunities, because you get an opportunity to see a whole different world maybe, or to see what somebody does in a whole new light. I did a great collaboration with somebody called Jal Palai on financial well-being. Her stuff is financial, my stuff is well-being. We came together and we created a resource, and I learned so much about what she does, and she got a deeper insight on what I do. And it means that I know exactly who she works with and how, so I can refer to her more easily. I can shout about what she does more easily. So it benefits both sides. And it was such a joy to do it as well. When you are a solopreneur, it's so nice to have those opportunities to work with other people and to be part of a team in that way. And you've talked just now there about it's okay to say. And it feels especially powerful in today's world. Like you say, you're told to be a certain way, or you feel an expectation that you have to behave in a certain way. And quite often that encourages us or tempts us to wear masks so that people don't see what we think of as our vulnerabilities. And I'm a passionate believer, and it's why I've got this podcast, that we often feel shame, or we are conditioned to feel shame around our vulnerabilities. Whereas I think when we are able to feel safe enough to embrace them and to really deeply explore them and to say things like, I'm not okay today, then that enables us to grow, but it also enables us to connect with other people. Because when we admit a vulnerability and are able to do that in not a needy way or a victim way, but just state it, then the other person hopefully is also able to go, gosh, yes, I feel vulnerable, maybe around that or maybe something else. So I'm not feeling okay today either. My not okay is in this area. And just to be able to share that is, I think that's our humanity, and that's what really allows us to connect on that deep level with others. So what inspired you to focus on that particular message, and what happens in the work that you do? What do you see when people finally give themselves permission to say openly, I'm not okay today?
My main obsession, I suppose you'd call it. Obsession is normally a word that's seen as negative. I don't use it in that term. I use it as a positive. My main focus, my main fascination, if you like, is the fact that inside here is me, right? There's nobody else in here with me. So I'm looking out at the world. This conversation we've had again before. And I've realized as I've got older that little Nigel, 7 years old, I don't know what to do, which is what's going on in my head a lot of the time, or not so much these days, but used to all the time, is not what the world sees, right? So it's not it's not what I'm feeling inside. It's what I present on the outside. Not in a show off way, not in a pretend way, not in a lying type way, just genuinely just being me. And when I went talking earlier on about being a disruptor, and the reason it's unintentional is because that's not my purpose. But I'm of an age now where I say to myself, well, what the hell? This is what I believe. I think this is the way the things should be. I'm always open to other people giving me other opinions, but this is my take on the world. And I'm fascinated. I speak to you or I speak to anybody else in the fact that you are in Robin universe, right? You are your whole universe. But in the scheme of things, without getting too metaphysical and all that, in the scheme of things, we are both tiny, tiny, tiny nothings Do you see what I mean? So I'm fascinated by that contrast between the two things. To us, in our world, we are everything. We are everything revolves around us because this is the only perspective we can have. We're not somebody else. But as far as people looking at me are concerned, they see something different. And I'm also of an age whereby I don't mind saying what's good about me as well as what's bad about me, which is a wonderful thing. Because when we're younger in particular, we turn around and we go, oh, I better not say that because they'll think I'm big-headed or I'm arrogant or, you know. And I was making a film the other day, funnily enough, and it was about self-help or, sorry, what's the word? Self-help, I suppose so. Or self-respect is not selfish. Because there's two reasons. First of all, it makes you function better as a human being. And secondly, it makes you more able to function in a way which helps other people. So somebody who takes on board, the crux of this is somebody who takes on board the fact that by looking after themselves, they can be useful to somebody else. They don't have to be. They can just look after themselves if they want to. That's fine. That's a good thing in itself. But the extra element then is the fact is that you are functional, you are articulate enough to then say to other people, I'm feeling good about me. How can I help you? So I think the crux of the answer would be this idea about, I love this idea about people being individuals and being their own worlds. And I want to get into other people's worlds as much as they will let me get into those worlds. I want them to say to me, this is where I live. This is my reality. And if I can have a taste of that, I think that's a huge privilege. And that's the thing that makes me do what I do, if you like.
I talk a lot about perspective. So there's my perspective, as you say, I can only see out of these two eyes.
Yeah.
I can't see out of yours. I can attempt to empathize and see what it might be like to walk in your shoes, but I'm never going to know because
No.
I haven't got all your past experiences, which help to set your filters and how you see out of your eyes. So yeah, those different and sometimes paradoxical, like my perception of my world is going to be quite different from your looking inwards
Yeah.
perception of my
Very
world.
much so.
And also you talk about those two ways in which that self-respect or self-care, or whatever we want to call it, is of benefit. I think there's a third, because I think if we practice that, we role model it to others. And in
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
that,
Could
we
be.
encourage them to get the two benefits. So that I'm looking after me, which means my life is good, but then I'm also more available to sharing what I'm doing or supporting you in whatever you need, because my cup is so full that it flows over. And I have
Yeah.
enough to share with others rather than I'm hanging on to those few little drops at the bottom because I'm so depleted. And you've talked a lot about communication and connection today and how that's the talking side of things and the saying things aren't okay, but it's also so much more than that. And one of your big things, which I mentioned in the bio about Taffman and the Grand Leek, you are
Yeah.
so big into humour and bringing humour and just reality into the work that you do. And it's real, it's experiential, it's learning through that training and through that practice and role play and human interaction. I love that it's so grounded and that it does bring that element of play in. So, can you tell us a little bit more? You've already touched on it, but tell us a little bit more about what that looks like and maybe feels like in practice and why this learning by doing is maybe more powerful than other traditional approaches. You mentioned role play, maybe one of that, seeing that as one of the traditional, or just a lecture or a seminar or something that's mostly one way. And I just wanted to say as well, when you talked about role play, so many of us hear that term and go, I don't want to do
Exactly.
that.
Exactly my point. If I can take that burden off people, and I like showing off anyway, right? And at the end, we'll give some connections to my YouTube channels, right? And people can look on there and they will see, and that's a fantastic question. It's almost like, I genuinely didn't know you were going to say that. It's almost like you set that up. About a year ago, I was actually doing stuff in relation to online regarding the learning live role play, right? I was also another character, which is called the Mature Maestro, who's quite serious about the way that he talks about well-being and positivity and stuff like that. And to be quite frank, I thought, bugger it, because this is just not what I really, really want to be doing. Or it's just a number of ways. It's not entirely what I want to be doing. So I've actually invented this very posh character. He's called the arsey old gripper. And the reason that he's called that is because of the fact that he's, in many ways, he is exactly that. Very stentorian, very sort of lecturing people all the time. Now listening, you little chickies and all that sort of thing. And the reason I did that, one, because it feeds that sort of that showing off thing again, but mainly because of going back to this disruptor thing. I don't want to be that serious because that's not the way that I look at it. And I was sitting there and I was smiling internally when you said about the humor, about the play, about all those things, right? And the reason that he has been created, if you like, is because of the fact that he has a fairly irreverent view in relation to how we should be dealing with these things. And to be honest, so do I. Something bad happened to me, but it happened. It's history. It's part of me. It's part of what creates what I am now. But I don't need to sit there and go, oh, woe is me. Oh, isn't it terrible what happened to me X amount of years ago and all that. I've done all that. And I'm hoping that by giving it never a disrespectful, but hopefully a humorous angle, that then will get people to understand that there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is a way of looking at this, which is not that drab sort of, oh, do. I understand you've got to go through that period. I went through it myself and I felt absolutely awful. And I understand absolutely, having been there myself, that you become physically and emotionally, what's the word? Not inept. You become like this disconnection, right? Where you can't take on board things. You can't concentrate. You can't sleep. You've got this hunger. You feel awful. All those things, right? But once I've gone through that, I need to do the slight disruptor thing. And as much as I want to gently poke people, I want to gently sort of ruffle some feathers. And I want them to, if necessary, say, oh, I don't like the fact that you're having a laugh with this. I'll say, well, explain to me why. And then I can tell my story and say, well, do you think differently now? So it's a really good question you asked me about the humor, about the play. And that's why the RCO Gripper actually exists, because he wants to debunk some of these ideas that we have to be dreadfully serious about these issues. Do you know what I mean? And for me, that's important.
There are things we can talk about through humour that we maybe can't approach too directly or too seriously, or at least we can introduce them with humour and then go on to maybe going deeper than we would have felt, because that humour creates a sense of safety. And if it gets too serious too quickly, then it can feel overwhelming. It can feel, like you say, like somebody's wagging a finger in your face or whatever. But if we bring it in through humour, it can often help to ease that conversation along and allow us to lean in more and to go to those deeper levels. So I think that's so important, and it's been a great conversation, but sadly we are out of time.
Ooh.
So I know it's gone so quickly. Would you just let people know, you mentioned your YouTube videos and things, would you let people know what the best way is to connect with you?
If they go on to YouTube, I'll actually give them an email address to contact as well. But if you go onto YouTube and if you search for, and I'll say these nice and slowly so people can think, what did he say? What did he say? The first one would be the RC, ARSEY, as in someone who's a bit, old gripper. So if you like, he is the light-hearted side of it. And the best other ones that you can look at then in relation to the other stuff we talked about would be learning live, role playing, communication. Now that's a bit more factual. Plus it's got some examples on there in relation to the sort of role play stuff that we do. But if you want to contact me via email, And I'll spell this one out because it's not that straightforward. It's called interactnow@gmail.com. So it's IN, all lowercase, INTAACTNOW, all one word, @gmail.com.
Wonderful. And those links will also be in the show notes below this episode. So lastly, just to say thank you very much again, Nigel, for coming along and sharing your amazing story in your amazing way. It's been great to have you here.
Thank you for asking me on. It's been good. I really enjoyed it.
And if you too have been watching and enjoying this episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe bell and to follow up on links with Nigel. And maybe see you again next time. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Vulnerability, Introspection and Growth. I hope it's given you a moment to breathe, reflect, and perhaps even see your own story with a little more compassion. If you find this conversation meaningful, I'd love it if you'd share, subscribe, or leave a review. It helps others find their way here too. Until next time, take gentle care, and remember, the journey inwards is where the real growth begins.